Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sunil Parab. I welcome you to JCF MRT, Group of Mumbai, India. We are in Department of Sanskrit, University of Mumbai, and in conversation with Dr. Ashok Aklujkar Sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, my first question is regarding Sanskrit. There was a time when most of the Indian literature was available only in Sanskrit language, but now we have English translations of most of the literature, which is widely referred by academic and research scholars. I want to know, from the perspective of literature review, is there a difference when we refer to the Sanskrit text and when we refer to the English text or the translation?
Well, your question can be worded broadly and in a narrow, focused way. Broad version of the question would be, are the existing English translations adequate? Have we covered the original body of literature to the sufficient extent? And the answer to that is, short answer is no. I'll explain why. And this narrower version would be individual instances of translations and so on. Have the translations been done in such a way that we don't need to go back to the primary sources again? The answer to that question is, on the whole, again, no.
Okay.
Now, it is true that we have made considerable progress. The translations of Puranas, which were main mythological texts, they either were very few in the beginning of the 20th century, or they were done in Victorian type of English, which was difficult to follow for many ordinary readers of English. From that point, we have come ahead considerably, and the translations published by Motilal Banarsi Das and others, especially translations based on the critical editions of the Puranas, are a big step forward. They are significant progress, and no serious scholar, no student of mythology should ignore them. So that's true. But why is it not adequate? See what has happened in the case of Indian history. That is as a parallel, because it's also a story, although we want it to be a true story. Correct? India right now has very weak departments of ancient Indian history, because the persons doing there have been allowed to progress to MA, PhD without having a reading knowledge of any classical Indian language. And they have depended on translations done in the 19th century, early 20th century. That has handicapped them. That is, many of them are not even aware that translations need to be questioned, that translations need to be improved. They have simply depended on them. Some translations, not all, have a British colonial bias as well. So the study gets on a wrong track right from the beginning. That is one reason why they are not adequate. The second thing is, we should not think of Sanskrit simply as one linguistic tradition. The Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Apabhransha, all these form a continuum. And the scholars up to 10th, 12th century AD, even beyond that up to 15th, 16th century AD, did not really think of Sanskrit as something absolutely separable from these other later traditions. And mythology doesn't restrict itself to one language. Like any other story, once it becomes popular, it gets into other languages. In fact, as you might have heard, Claude Lévi-Strauss said, a translation can kill a beautiful poem, but a translation cannot kill a myth, because as long as the central events, the basic structure remains the same, the myth can be translated very easily into another language. And therefore we should not be thinking of Sanskrit as a kind of island in between others. It's really an island joined by several bridges to other languages, including Sri Lanka, tribal languages and others, including Southeast Asia, where Indian stories have been transmitted all the way up to Indonesia and to a smaller extent even Philippines. So yes, Sanskrit is the major part. Yes, Sanskrit has frequently the original story, but to interpret that story, we also need to know how it was understood in Indian history itself. Why should we privilege English translators or scholars from other countries and ignore the native, renderings, different renderings of the same story? They were scholars too, and in fact, it can be quite instructive to see how they took it and how modern scholars are taking it. So that's why my short answer might have sounded a little bit curt, but that is the truth.
Okay.
We have a huge price to pay if we do not keep the tradition of going back to the original sources again and again. In historical scholarship, of which mythological studies is a part, there is no last word as such. We simply keep on refining our understanding. We keep on enriching it because new ways of looking at the old material occur to us. And unless you are also thinking in terms of words of the original language, you miss many of these angles. That's why I would say that being complacent with the existing translations is not the right way. Another thing I would say is that when we say most of the literature has been translated, especially Puranas and epics like the Mahabharata, old ancient epics, not the relatively artificial epics of Kalidasa, Ashwaghosh and so on, but works like the Mahabharata, which are similar in style, similar in language stage with the Puranas. Now, but that is not the extent of Indian mythological literature. Even if you confine yourself to Sanskrit, you have to take the Sthala Puranas into account. And on Sthala Puranas, hardly any work has been done. In a rare instance, an American or European anthropologist comes, he's primarily interested in a Sthala, usually place of pilgrimage like Nasik or other place. Then he begins to get into local versions as well as Sanskrit versions. He or she builds up a combined account of the cultural history of the place. That has to be done, of course. But here, the inadequacy of remaining content with Sanskrit translations is obvious in many cases. Also, the types of myths. That is, if you implicitly, when we say most of the relevant literature has been translated, implicitly we are confining myths only to stories. Yes, stories is probably the soul of myths and so on, but there are social myths, there are convention myths with which no elaborate story is associated, but we have to know them to the extent they are mentioned and with a brief mention of the story. Because otherwise we will not understand it. And that means the Vrata literature, just like the Sthala Purana, the Vrata literature is also living storehouse of myths. So why do women practice certain vows and so on? We should not miss the larger picture in concentrating on just one particular language, one particular genre of literature. This is not the way we should go. That's why. So there are many reasons. Now let me give you one of the most important reasons. That is, recent studies show that early Indian chronology is very poorly formulated. Now, not deliberately, but the resources were very meager, inadequate in the beginning. And therefore, dating of all this literature is not reliable dating anymore. And we can prove with very objective textual evidence and evidence pointing in the same direction from many angles that the Indian civilization is older than it's normally taken to be. So, for example, we can prove in the case of the Rig Veda that the parts that describe the Saraswati as a flowing river could not have been written after 1900 BC. And see here, we teach our children that Rig Veda is somewhere between 1200 BC and 1500 BC, and we keep on repeating that. We repeat it to such an extent that if someone takes a different view, that person is doubted right from the beginning, and it's said, oh, he has antiquity anxiety or he has antiquity frenzy. This is how the reaction takes place. What the questioner should be doing is going back to the actual passages, inscriptions, and so on that have been pointed out by the scholar proposing a different dating. Now, is this simply a matter of minor academic fussiness? No, because in the larger global picture, whether your civilization is older or not, whether how it was related to other older civilizations really matters. This has even economic consequences. And I'm not saying prove things to be older just out of nationalism. If hard scholarly work points in the direction of greater antiquity for some of your things, don't hesitate to say so. This is the way it is. So in the case of Rig Veda, I say the older parts cannot be later than 1900 BC. The astronomical evidence in the Mahabharata generally points in the direction of 3000 BC. Now this is, we have to distinguish here between the formation of the epic itself and the actual battle. The actual battle probably did not take place the way it's described. There are already several unbelievable elements in it. But the dating of the description, the dating of the Mahabharata text usually is done from 500 BC to about 3rd, 4th century AD. That is simply too late. That is, we have to see that manuscripts take us only back up to 5th century AD. That's true. But the story itself must have been current for a much longer time. And then in between, we come to a date which is the bedrock of all ancient Indian dating. That is Ashoka's date. That is King Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka, whatever way you phrase it. He is placed in 3rd century BC. Now, if you really look at all the objective clues, then Ashoka has to be not later than 800 BC. And there were 3 traditions of Ashoka, mainly. That is one preserved in Kalhana's Rajatirangini, which is the oldest historical, realistic version of Ashoka's life. Then what we have preserved in his inscriptions, which is slightly toward the direction of legend. It's not really a myth still, but you have sort of greater coloring of the historical events, greater exaggeration in the inscriptions. Then also in the Sinhalese documents such as Deepavamsa and Mahavamsa, that's the second phase. And third phase would be Ashoka in Mahayana literature, where almost all historical traces are gone, and Ashoka becomes an ideal devotee in a way. That is, he was a very bad person, extremely cruel. He happened to make a kind act toward a Buddha who lived, according to public imagination, who lived much before the historical Shakyamuni Buddha. And then he says, because of this act of compassion, he is rewarded with an empire and so on. So that's where you clearly see there is no congruence with historical details that is available. He has already become a great king, and the intention is to say, even with one single seemingly insignificant act, a devotee can acquire great things. It's like the Hindu stories where a man is, Ajamila or other, he's completely wicked in his life, and on his deathbed he calls his son and says, Narayana, bring me water. And because he has uttered the holy name Narayana, he is completely relieved. So what you have in Mahayana literature is Ashoka of that time. Now all these stages we would miss if we refuse to date Ashoka back, and K.D. Setna in his book has given many objective reasons.
Okay.
It's our scholars because they do not read the original sources again, or because they have been told again and again that Ashoka belongs to 3rd century AD. Anyone who tries to push the date back is questioned. The proper course would have been, of course, to take Setna's arguments and point out which ones are valid and which ones are not invalid. Okay. That doesn't happen. And all this is a consequence of creating a generation of scholars who do not understand the importance of primary sources and who are not willing to go back to them.
Sir, currently we are witnessing a trend of literature or the novels in which mythological characters are picked up and entirely new fiction is written. Also, mythological villains are being glorified and novels are being written from the perspective of villains. These trends are being widely accepted and popularized. What is your personal opinion about these trends?
A tradition should always be doing that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not just a matter of vague expressions like freedom of speech, but this is the very essence of the creativity of a tradition.
Okay.
And Indians are shying away on doing this, and if someone does it, that person is either marked for a great literary achievement or is denounced. This is the reactions devout followers denounce that person, and some other literary critics, etc., who are basically secular, to use a simpler expression, they say, what a great creation. So this is what happens. Actually, there should be freedom for this. And the main reason we think this is a kind of problematic situation, or we need to note it specifically, is because we are doing our history mainly through newspapers. This is, and we go in the direction of hero worship a lot more than Western nations and other nations go. Hero worship occurs in every society. There are followers of Kennedy in the United States who think he could do no wrong. Correct? So that's there, but the extent to which one can go is becoming dangerous in India.
We have made the mythology part of our religion.
Correct. And this was not our way. The original tradition in Sanskrit, Prakrit, etc., is very liberal. They don't deny the other party the freedom to say new things. They don't. In fact, they admire great poetry. That is, Jain monks, for example, were so much detached from the world. Those who were really living, according to the ideals, but there was a large number of them. But they did not mind telling myths with lot of erotic details and other things, because they knew this was poetry, and poetry needs a different aesthetic. Poetry needs is a play good for human intelligence. It's a way of sharpening sensibilities of the society. So just as if they had a liberal view when they were actually practicing such a demanding religion themselves, why can't we have it? Just relax a little bit. That's one thing. And secondly, I would say this is not such a new thing as we think it to be. Why it strikes us? Because we have the press. Immediately 1,000 copies of something are produced. It's not like the manuscript age where a book has to be laboriously produced and it spreads very slowly. Here with one night's printing, you could reach 1,000 people or 2,000 people. And that's why it comes as a sort of wave that is overwhelming us. But it's not really that new. For example, the plays of Bhaswar discovered in Kerala, the Mahabharata plays, they all have innovations. Urubhanga tries to show Duryodhana in a better light. So villain is shown as not all that bad. He has his good points, he has his principles, and so on. Similarly, in Pratima, Kaikeyi is shown as deliberately engineering Rama's banishment so that Ravana would be killed. So this is not new. Then gradually we have moved. Tagore was a great master of it. But although Tagore did not exactly change a villain into a hero, but he went into the hearts of minor Ramayana characters, Lakshmana's wife, Bharata's wife. What would their Ramayana have been? So this is a beginning. This is not actually making heroes or heroines out of them. But in one story, which is an absolutely remarkable story of Tagore, where Guru Gobind Singh's death is narrated. And Tagore has changed history by saying Guru Gobind Singh deliberately wants this his attendant to kill him.
Okay.
You see, now a fabulous story. And Tagore is, he is great as a poet, but I think he's even greater as a storyteller. And this is what is done. So this is progress. In Marathi, for example, you have the story of Ahalya narrated in different ways. That whoever was thought of as being done injustice to is ripe for this kind of treatment. Some novels on Maratha history, whether they do it justifiably or not, I'm no judge, because I don't read the historical documents of the Maratha period in the original. But narrating the life of Trimbakji Dengle in a different way, this is what a society needs. And if the author is taking too many liberties, the work flops. So we need not be worried about it. It should go ahead. And, there are many other things. There's a beautiful story that I read. I don't know who the author is. Okay. But you will see that when reading the Mahabharata, we rightly see Ekalavya as a big crack in Drona's armor. That is, here is a Brahmin who sells his expertise for employment. Right? That's one thing. Although the Mahabharata makes quite a believable case by saying he has suffered from poverty too much. So his spirit ultimately breaks and he becomes someone's employee. And then he rules out Ekalavya because Ekalavya would be a better archer than Arjuna. And so several stories have been written by saying Ekalavya represents the tribal class, the Dalit class, and therefore this is a Brahmin committing injustice. Those readings are fine too. I'm not against them. But I read a reading where Mahabharata war is taking place or has just taken place, and Ekalavya gets the news of it, and he hears that Drona abandoned his weapons after saying that Ashwatthama had been killed, and he's sitting there for almost motionless in his chariot, and then Drishtadyumna comes and cuts off Drona's head. That's the sort of official version in the Mahabharata. This story says Ekalavya is extremely sad. He said, if I had not lost this thumb, I could have killed Drishtadyumna and saved my teacher. See, this is really artistic insight. That is, those readings where social injustice is read, they are justified too. But this is an absolutely fabulous way of bringing two ends together. That something bad has happened in the Ekalavya's thumb being cut off, but Ekalavya is still a very devout student. So yes,
according to him, he doesn't see Dronacharya as a villain.
No,
or he doesn't see as injustice.
And that would be natural because in old days they did not see them as villains. This is again another big area of Indian history where we have to do a lot of rethinking to do. India's sociology is frequently the bad boy and whipped frequently, but it's not all that bad if you compare similar things in other parts of the world. But that's a larger topic. Let's leave aside. Okay.
Sir, we would like to have your guidance regarding research in mythology. Which are the areas or the topics in Hindu and Buddhist mythology where comparatively much exploration is not done, or where more research is needed to be done?
I will have to think about the latter part. I can't list the areas for you right away, but I will tell you where, in my view, the problem becomes difficult to handle. In the Buddhist tradition, the emphasis is on rationality from the beginning. That is at least how we have come to associate with it. The Buddha says, for example, don't get involved in things which are not available for direct testing. Whether the self lives after death or not. The avyakaraniya questions. That is what he says. And the one reason is just define your life, regulate your life with the questions you can answer. That is one thing. Later Buddhist tradition then formulates this principle very explicitly, saying tapat chedacha nikashat suvarnamiva pandita pariksha bhikshavo grahyam madvacho natu gauravat. That is, test even my sayings, my statements, just as you test gold. You heat it up, you cut it, you rub it against the touchstone, and then you say whether gold is genuine or not. The same way you should subject my statements to scrutiny. Now, in world history, this was an absolutely great pronouncement, and therefore we get the impression that only the Buddhist tradition was emphasizing a rational approach, objective approach to this extent. Actually, similar tendencies exist in a different configuration in Brahmanism, in Jainism, and so on. What has happened here, a kind of disjunction. Buddhism must have been originally meant for mendicants, sannyasins of one type or the other. But Buddhism had to make a compromise and admit the Gahapatis, the ordinary people. They were the economic backbone of the Buddhist community. They were to be turned into members of a civil society according to the Buddha. That's a big achievement. But once you move from a religion primarily meant for world renouncers to a religion meant for those who are still in the world, enjoying the world, and just want moderate degrees of renounce at the most. That is, they don't want to be spending a lot of money on just luxuries and so on. They will restrict their display of sensual pleasures and so on. And now when you do that, when that compromise takes place, the Buddhist mythology really begins.
Okay.
So inherent Buddhism does not have much scope for mythology. That's the problem. And you will see that at present most scholars of Buddhism think of it as an antithesis of Brahmanism right from the beginning. We have theories such as the Upanishads were an internal revolt against ritual-oriented Brahmanism, and Buddhism was an external revolt against it. Those are all, historically speaking, very weak positions.
Okay.
For several reasons, but the important thing is no religion rises out of a vacuum. So the Buddha could teach what he could teach because there were Brahmins, there were Shramanas of various colors, and there was Jainism and so on. That's why his contemporary audience should not be recast only in our imagination, because our imagination is tainted by modern tendencies, modern classifications, and so on. So there was a very rich background for what the Buddha did. A society never changes from one religion absolutely to another religion. It's true that converts are more radical than those who are following a particular religion for a long time. But still, converts cannot manage to shake off everything that they have. In no society this has happened. That is, Christians retain Jewish elements, Muslims retain Christian and Jewish elements. That's acknowledged in their own tradition. So same thing happens with Buddhism, and our historians should have this kind of larger view of things. And you see that no matter how greatly the scholars emphasize the objectivity in Buddhism, a kind of distanced, detached, critical outlook, actual Buddhism has many of the same things as other religions have. Once you go to Tibetan Buddhism, once you go to Chinese Buddhism, Vietnamese Buddhism, you see rituals, you see similar explanations of things. So that also proves that even if the founder tries to make a clean break, he or she would not succeed. Correct? So historians make a mistake in imagining that up to point A comes Brahmanism, then point B begins Buddhism. This is not the way things happen. So that we have to keep in mind. And the historian, modern historian of Buddhism, who has pointed out this nicely with lot of evidence is Gregory Chopin of University of California, Los Angeles. That is, he has shown how many other traditions, folk traditions or Brahmanical traditions, in some cases we don't know where they came from, are found even in the earliest Pali Buddhism. So that's historically the accurate picture. The difference of emphasis does exist, but it's not a difference of category altogether. Okay. That's what I'm saying. So yes, the mythology of Mara is dominant in Buddhism. That's why you see early Sanskrit Buddhist epics narrate the story of Mara, as in Ashok Buddha Charita. You have again depictions of Mara in the Pali accounts and so on. But to go beyond Mara, Buddhism and to some extent Jainism simply have to take Brahmanical, what we call Brahmanical deities. They may not be entirely Brahmanical. Brahmanical deities with name change or something like that. That is, Mara is preferred to Madana or others, Ananga or other synonyms of Cupid and god of love, etc. So the distinction is in name mainly, and in emphasizing the military aspect of Mara. He comes as an attacking force, whereas in Sanskrit Brahmanical epics, he is the one who has arrows of flower and is quite a delicate, to some extent even a comic character. So this much of difference takes place, but the deities, whether it's Padmavati in Jainism or Tara in Buddhism and so on, these were shared by Brahmins, Buddhists, because they were part of a more distant past on which all these great traditions leaned. That's how much it is. So I can't give you a list, but I can see that
it will definitely give us a direction.
We should not expect an entirely different Buddhist mythology, because the Buddhist revolution was of a different kind. That's it.
Sir, currently there are different courses in Sanskrit, Indian philosophy or Indian mythology all around the globe. Is there any difference in pattern of study in Indian courses and the courses being conducted abroad?
There definitely is. That is, I have taught at both places, and the thing is, we don't make our students independent. That's the main thing. We should not give this pattern of teacher coming to the class and just giving ready-made translations. That pattern has to change. Students should be contributing through translations, through questions and so on. And in the West, this begins at a very early age. It's not really research in the usual sense, but they acquaint students with that kind of word. For example, when my children were in the 3rd or 4th grade, they were told to write on a topic by going to the public library. We have great public library, just as we have in a few places in Maharashtra too. So they were told, and all they had to do was to take the keywords, see the library catalog, and find out 1 or 2 books that inform them adequately about that particular area. So they would come with a list of books, they would have summaries written, they would have a sort of attempt at putting them in a logical sequence, and that was their research. But this has great psychological effect. They are not afraid of going in the stacks. They know the basic techniques of where the titles would be sufficient, where they will have to go by synonymous expressions, not just the exact title of a book. And the advantages of standing in the stack of a library, and you take the book you are looking for in your hand, but there are 5-10 other books which also call for your attention. This is a big psychological advantage, and the fear of research goes away. So that's what we have to start doing in all these courses. Any course I taught was never without student participation. In Sanskrit classes, it would be in the form of translation. In philosophy classes, I would actually stand in the middle of the class, and I would sometimes deliberately create groups of students and make them debate with each other.
Acha.
You know that because that's where they remain interested. They can contribute from their personal experiences and so on. But we should change. In all these courses that you mentioned, we have to involve the student more, and we have to never discourage a student by saying that's an absolutely wrong view or something like that. Okay, my reaction would be, you think so? Defend it.
Okay.
You know that is the before giving my judgment, and then they may come round to my view and say no, I was wrong and so on. But that is education also. That's what we have to do, I think. That's the basic thing. But there again depends on the in your question you did not refer to the level of the course. Now lecturing dwindles as the course level goes up. With my PhD students, I would almost never have a lecture. I would say, okay, this is what you have written, your chapter. If the chapter has been submitted to me beforehand, I would have questions, and I would be asking them questions.
Okay.
That's how there's no lecture as such. But they are ready by that time. You know. So we should have not only a more friendly atmosphere, more open atmosphere, but we should adopt different strategies. And we should remember that if something is done with one's own hands, one remembers it much better than simply listening to someone and so on. That is what is to be done.
Sir, currently through Joseph Campbell Foundation's Mythological Roundtable, we are collaborating with 60 groups of mythology scholars across the globe. Do you think the similar collaboration can take place between students or teachers of mythology academic institutes such as the Oxford Center of Hindu Studies and Sanskrit Department, University of Mumbai?
Yes, it can take place. In fact, it's mainly a question of geographical difficulty. Young people are very much interested in meeting students from other institutions. So it's a question of planning. It's a question of first doing it in the country itself, and of course if part of the country happens to be nearer to another country, you can have international collaboration also. Depends on the realities of the situation, the economics and geography in particular of the situation. In North America particularly, graduate students establish their own unions.
Okay.
I mean unions not in the sense of labor unions, but they have a notional group on paper. And so, for example, California has a number of universities. So graduate students in University of California, Berkeley, will say, okay, we are holding a meeting of graduate students reading papers at Los Angeles. So the University of Los Angeles students would participate. Similarly, all the other campuses of the University of California will participate. And so it can be done. The universities provide nominal funds. The students make arrangements to spend a night or two in each other's houses. That's the way it can be done. It doesn't have to be expensive hotel arrangement all the time. Between the University of British Columbia, where I spent most of my life, and the University of Washington, Seattle, the distance is only 120 miles. It can be covered in 2.5 hours. There, what we do is we have a seminar, South Asia seminar of Pacific Northwest. That's what we call it. That seminar takes place once at our campus, once in Seattle. And what we do is scholars and graduate students gather on Friday evening. They may have a dinner together where everyone pays for his own way. And then on Saturday, we have 3 or 4 paper reading sessions where graduate students are encouraged to read papers. If their professors think that this paper is worthy of being presented before faculty members, they encourage them to do that. And so first students do it among themselves. On Friday, they can have a separate gathering also if they want. But by Saturday afternoon, late afternoon, everything is over.
Okay.
You see, so there is no great expense. One university simply has to make the space available.
Okay.
That should be done. That's how it will start. In some cases, geographical proximity, I said. In Europe, for example, a side of Denmark is so close to Sweden that you can see the lights on the other side. Something that used to be the case in pre-partition India, that is in Amritsar you could see the lights of Lahore. So what happens is that these faculty members, they come together and they say, okay, one weekend we are going to meet. And those who are visiting just take the ferry, cross across and spend a day. Go there in the morning, come back in the evening. So yes, it's very important, and that also leads to greater bibliography preparation. Not only new ideas, new ways of looking at a subject present themselves, but also what's happening at other institutions, what resources they have. That ultimately helps. Sure.
So along with comparative mythology, Department of Sanskrit is also the home for the courses in manuscriptology. We have many scholars working professionally as manuscript translators. There are many workshops organized by the department itself, and there are many organizations which have outsourced the transliteration work to our department. Is there a similar scope in manuscriptology on a global spectrum?
Definitely, but because we are not valuing our heritage, the number of Indian scholars active is not very different from number of outside scholars, because we have fewer students on the whole, but we have quality students, and therefore at certain stage in life they would say, I have to see what the manuscripts actually look like, I have to study them. We don't have an atmosphere here where even the question will occur to students. I'm glad all these workshops are being held. Their content needs to be different, in the sense the teachers who have been trained in the last 50, 60 years have to expand their horizons. They are not best equipped for this. You can see that there was a scholar at Aligarh Muslim University, Professor S.R. Sharma, Shri Ramalu Sharma. The way he taught textual criticism and the way someone from a government institution teaches, markedly different. Sharma was so superior in his knowledge because he had studied, he had struggled, and so that's what I'm saying. Why not continue the tradition of V.S. Sukhtankar, D.D. Kosambi, or R.P. Kangle? Those should be the models for textual criticism, and we still haven't passed the primitive stage of saying that reading which is found in most manuscripts is the older reading. That doesn't work that way. You have to have backing for a particular reading of different versions and recensions. That's what you need to have. And secondly, the difficult readings that is initially present problems, need to be thoroughly discussed, because the difficult readings are likely to be substituted by contextually simple readings, but the other way is not likely. So if you have a difficult reading, unusual reading, you should have the skills to look in different directions, to consult works of a different type and dictionaries of a different type. Do it. So that's where we have to do. Manuscriptology is the very basic foundation of this field, and because we have faculty members who are serving on various committees and who haven't really done manuscript work of any kind. That is, I have personally tried to do it, not because I'm very good at it, but because I want to save manuscripts. So I have traveled through Kerala, I have traveled through other parts. Wherever I could save manuscripts, I have done so. The situation is really tragic. Every day an important manuscript is being lost in India. So we have to prepare people to identify fragmentary works and so on. Sometimes fragmentary works are thrown out, thinking, oh, we don't know where it comes from. Well, precisely because they are fragmentary, they are likely to be old and therefore likely to be precious. So we have to struggle with them and find. This does not happen in many cases. And the government of India in 1972, I had said, create vans, let them go to every place, every taluka place, every district place, announce in local newspapers and over the bullhorns, that the van is going to be in your neighborhood. If you have any important document, bring them, we'll photocopy them and we'll return the original to you. Still this has not been done. Indira Gandhi, the National Mission for Manuscript, doesn't go for uncatalogued manuscript. They go to the established institutions, follow their catalog and microfilm. This has limited use. That is, yes, it's important to preserve those manuscripts also, but the real new findings will come from going to private collections, going to what manuscripts, manuscript libraries have thrown in one corner of the library as unintelligible. That's where new findings will come, and they don't do that. So it's a big gap, and that has to be remedied. Another rule that I faced just last year was any scholar coming and asking for a manuscript or copy should be given only 10 pages. This is ridiculous. That is, what do 10 pages do to a man? Suppose it's 100 pages work. It's not either serving my interest nor preserving the work. This is what I mean. Who comes up with these rules really amazes me sometimes. Who is going to come there? I went for this particular manuscript 50, 60 years after the library was formed. I went through a laborious process of consulting as many manuscript catalogs as possible. Then one catalog list is, I apply to some institution, in some cases get the travel money. In nowadays I don't even worry about it. I spend my own money and go there. But that's minor. But I go to the library and then they say, yes, we have this manuscript, but you'll get only 10 pages of it. The next scholar is going to turn up for that manuscript. Is very uncertain. And he may turn up or she may turn up 50 or 100 years later. By that time, the manuscript has become dust. So this is, we have to be liberal. We have to give PhDs for editing manuscripts. I don't know why at present you have to have a 300-page thesis. Every which of the thesis, those theses starts with Sion or Max Muller, even if it's dealing with a 20th century author. So I don't know. The repetition of the same information. Instead of that, let students edit new works, even if it's 20 pages, if they are very ideally edited, translated, why not? That's really valuable hands-on experience. That's what we have. So yes, there is a global dimension, but the world is overtaking India. The kind of quality work that is done in Hamburg, in Tokyo, in Kyoto, in Pondicherry by the French Institute, generally speaking, don't overgeneralize my statement. Generally speaking, Indian work doesn't even come close to that.
Okay.
And there's no reason why that should be the situation. The resources are here. We have intelligent students. We have to train them and change these silly rules. Because the new conclusion doesn't have to be only in the form of proving someone right or wrong in interpretation. It can be in the form of preserving a relatively minor work that provides a link between the great works. And what matters is not the outcome. What matters is really the journey toward that outcome, the actual training a student gives. That student will never be diffident. Even if he or she has edited only 20 pages, that the confidence that comes from it is not going to come from copying 10 pages of Max Miller and 5 pages of Sayana. That's what it is.
Thank you, sir. It has been a great pleasure meeting you today, and your wise words will definitely be
they are
they will
controversial.
definitely provide directions for JCF MRT Group of Mumbai, India, and also for all the JCF MRT groups across the globe. Thank you, sir.
You are welcome.